Very well. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Trench Excavation Symposium today at the University of Texas at Arlington. Thank you to everyone in the audience for being here. Thank you to everyone online for participating. I am Josh Flusher, the Assistant Regional Administrator for OSHA here in Region 6 for Cooperative and State Programs. We're going to get it kicked off. We got an exciting agenda with a lot of experts in the industry today that's really going to bring valuable information on how to protect workers when they're working in a trench or excavation type environment and the challenges that you may face working in this very mobile, flexible, fast-paced industry. So I want to start out with just a brief story to kind of give you an idea of my passion behind this topic. And it really goes back to whenever I was a compliance officer in the field, and I believe the year was 2005, right around Christmas time. It was actually 2 days before Christmas. So the day before Christmas Eve, it was December 23rd, 2005, and we got a phone call in our local area office about a trench cave-in that occurred up in Melissa, Texas. So we dispatched co-shows to that. I was one of the co-shows that actually went to that investigation, and when I arrived on site, 2 workers had been buried in a 28-foot trench that had collapsed. At that time, fire and rescue was on site attempting to do a rescue operation. I arrived on site at about 5 o'clock that afternoon, and I didn't leave that site until 9 o'clock the next morning. It took a local fire department that long to actually recover the bodies at that point, and that has always stuck out into my mind how important this specific topic is. And the reason why is while we're there for those 14, 15 hours that day, the family of the victims were showing up at the job site. And that was something that will always stick out in my mind, is to watch the wives of the gentlemen that were buried, watch the kids come to that particular location, and they're off to the side just playing like everything is fine, not knowing what's going to be the end result of the event that they were there about to witness. So that has always driven my passion for worker safety and health, especially in trenching and excavation. So I want to thank UTA, and I want to thank the local NUCA chapter here in North Texas for sponsoring this event. The information here is life-saving information. It will go to the day-to-day activities in trenches, excavations, and hopefully save someone's life at the end of the day. So we are very excited about that. I want to pass on a little bit of information about how OSHA facilitates construction inspections in the trenching and excavation industry. As most folks know, OSHA has a national emphasis program on trenching and excavation, and we've had that national emphasis program since 1985. Basically gives us the authority to inspect trenches and excavations that we see and in plain view. In about 1989, we released the new standard in trenching and excavation and how you protect workers. At that time, on average in the United States, we lost 70 workers a year in a trench or excavation while they were at work. 70 individuals that did not get to go home at the end of the day because they were at work. They were at work doing some type of activity in a trench or excavation. So what we've done since then is we've put on events such as this. We've tried to do outreach, we've done inspections. That is our attempt to curtail that number. And I think not only OSHA, but the industry has been successful in bringing that number down. I can tell you now, on average, across the United States, we're losing approximately 27 lives a year in trenches and excavations. Certainly still not an acceptable number, but that number is better than 70 lives lost a year. So we're certainly making a difference, but our work's not done. That's why we're hosting events like this. We still do have that national emphasis program on trenching and excavation. We roughly conduct about 1,700 inspections a year across the country. That end result is about 3,000 violations that we issue in trenching and excavation type scenarios. So it is certainly something that is passionate to me. I will leave you with one more story, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bob Braun with the university. And this is a story from last year in the Cleveland, Ohio area. It's where an individual was at work. He was working from the bottom of a trench. He snaps a photo with his cell phone and sends it to his girlfriend and says, "It's awfully deep in here." Sends her a photo of the trench that's actually above him. And then approximately an hour later, that trench caved in and he was killed. That was the last communication that his loved one heard from him before he lost his life in a trench. So as we progress throughout the day, it's my hope that somebody will be able to take home a technique that will allow them to protect workers when they're working in the trenching and excavation environment. Because at the end of the day, 27 lives lost a year is still too many. we're on the goal to zero, and that's where we want to make the biggest impact. So with that, I do want to say again, thank you to the NUCA, especially the local chapter here, for sponsoring this, for sponsoring the Standdown that occurred across the country. And I also want to thank Bob and the University of Texas at Arlington for hosting us. Events like this is what's going to make a difference in safety and health, and we're certainly hopeful that we'll be able to see a difference as we progress. So thank you again. Thank you for the folks at home. Thank you for the folks at the audience here today, and we're certainly looking forward to it. So with that, Bob Braun is the director of the OSHA Education Center here at the University of Texas at Arlington. And Bob, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. There we go. Yes, with the University of Texas at Arlington, and we're one of 26 OSHA education centers across the nation. And I just wanted to also share a story which really just happened this morning. We had one of our instructors come in to do a training class for us, and he happens to also do trench rescue training for a volunteer fire department up in Illinois. And when he came in today, he was telling me and showing me pictures of a rescue that occurred over the weekend. He was driving in the local community and got a notification that there was a wall collapse. He wasn't sure what it meant, wall collapse, so he responded to the scene along with the other volunteer fire department members, and when he got there, it was a trench collapse. And just occurred this weekend, and the individual was totally covered in the collapse of the wall, and they were starting to dig his head out, and he wasn't breathing. So they kept digging and put in some shoring to try and keep the walls from collapsing around him, and as more people arrived, the rescue went on, and they finally got his chest uncovered enough that he could start breathing. Bottom line is that luckily it was a rescue and not a recovery, but he was severely hurt. He got broken facial bones, several broken ribs, and severe damage to his spleen, but he will survive. But just fortunate, and those things happen all too often, and of course there was no protection used in the operation, and as a result the wall collapsed, and this individual came very close to dying, and there's just too many of those. Just as Josh said, there's just too many of those that go on. So in part of the education centers, our role is to provide some of that training, and on the slide you'll see the primary courses. And most of the education centers, well, all of them, will provide the one-day course we have is 7410, Managing Excavation Hazards. It's an 8-hour orientation overview of excavation issues. A couple times a year we provide that for free of charge, usually in the spring for Workers' Memorial Week. We provide that free of charge, and then we'll also do it in the fall as a courtesy just to help people be able to get some training. The other one is our regular OSHA 3015, which is the excavation, trenching, and soil mechanics course. We provide that routinely throughout Region 6, and all the other ed centers do as well. And then our competent person course for trenching and excavation, which really goes into a lot more depth and requirements and some more hands-on. So those are the typical training courses. The problem with the training for workers that work in the trench areas is they get used to working in that environment and nothing ever happens. And so their experience is, this is the way we do business every day. And nothing's ever happened to us, or we escaped without any problem. And unfortunately, when these events occur, it's tragic, and those people need to understand what the hazards are. And all too often, we don't prepare them for what those hazards are. And the training we give them has to be more than just a cognitive, knowledge-based training. It has to be some kind of hands-on where they really get the experience that this is really dangerous, that you have a lot of weight, going to be bearing down on you, and it happens so fast. With very few people that can outrun collapse, and I think those people have Olympic medals, and most of us don't. And as a result, we just can't move out of the way fast enough. You're going to be caught, and you could be killed or severely injured. And again, just some training for people, just to get them into the knowledge and the realization that these things are really dangerous. And we take it for granted that nothing's going to happen. The walls are firm, looks okay, but any little change can happen. So it's important that as people go through the training, they understand the importance of inspections, daily inspections, inspections after any change that occurs in the operation, and then we make people that are working there knowledgeable what the hazards are. and that we're really cognizant of all the hazards that present themselves in trench issues. So we're very happy to be able to sponsor this Trench Safety Symposium with ANUCA and OSHA. I think it's just a way to reach out to people and let them know training is available, training is important. Wherever you get that training, you need to make sure that people are knowledgeable what the hazards are and what the controls that are going to protect them and save their lives are. So I would like now to just kind of turn it over to some of our people that have actual experience in the field. And our first guest speaker is from the North Texas Contracting here with NUCA, the first president of the Texas NUCA chapter. And his name's Zach Fusilier. So Zach.
Thank you. And I appreciate you guys having us. So as Bob said, I'm Zach Fusilier with North Texas Contracting. We are mid-sized utility contractor here in Texas, about $150 million a year revenue, about 700 employees, primarily concrete utilities. So we self-perform a lot of the open cut trenching that we're, the safety aspects we're here to talk about today. So when OSHA and UTA asked us to come talk, they requested from NUCA a couple contractors that do this day in, day out to talk about some real life stories or near misses or applications where we use safety training to make us safer. So my company happens to be working on the UTA campus on 2 jobs. So we're here now. UTA enforces safety stringently, so it's our company. We work on a lot of larger projects with construction managers that have safety programs that are implemented, full-time safety professionals that would supervise us, and programs like, we're working with Hunt on the UTA SEER and working with Hill and Wilkinson here on a resident hall, which when you work for somebody like Hill and Wilkinson, you have the luxury of operating under a full-time safety program, safety professionals daily, pre-activity meetings, planning. So kind of leads me to what I want to talk about as far as my real-life stories, where we work on a lot of bigger contracts where there's going to be safety enforcement, and it forces you to plan and talk about risk before you start, where we're not seeing industry-wide or in our company, we're not seeing big-ticket safety risks such as a 28-foot ditch with no trench box in it, or guys not sloping or benching, or entering a confined space without the proper permit. I mean, we're, as we train and change the culture and get our people safe, what's really happening that I've noticed and that I want to discuss today from my little real life stories that you guys wanted to hear is more the near misses or the things you take for granted. So, we've, knock on wood, we've never had a major trench safety event where, an individual was caught in a ditch or there was a cave-in. So I'm thankful for that. What we have had, and probably the 2 biggest injuries or 2 biggest potential near misses we've ever had, and they both involved equipment being damaged, no individual was hurt, was taking the trench box in and out of the ditch, putting it together, hoisting it, the stuff that you would you could take for granted. And we found with our employees that's usually when we have an incident that somebody could be potentially injured, was taking something for granted, going too quick, split-second decision by an employee to not do what he was trained to do. And so that's really been our focus lately is, there's lots of checks and balances with these bigger contracts and these bigger general contractors and these companies like ours that do the annual training, the quarterly training, the big emphasis on the big picture stuff we're really focused on making a plan. That's all the way down to the daily, if not hourly, focus of have a plan, identify risks, identify hazards, take it seriously. And what I've noticed with our own employees is when you put the focus on the individual people, daily basis, hourly basis, you really get a difference versus big picture safety issues, which as I've said, I think we've done a real good job, getting away from major trench safety violations, especially, NUCA's putting a big focus on it, OSHA's putting a big focus on it, entities like UTA that we partnership put a big focus on it, but, what we're really trying to do in the future is mitigate all the risks, whether it be installing a spreader bar with pins and hoisting it, or the loader operator who's putting the trench box backing up into the haul truck that just dropped it off. I mean, little things that you take for granted that we've seen trends and patterns, and when we meet with Ocean, we meet with ourselves, and we try to figure out what we can do better to make things safer and have less incidents or less near misses. That's really what I would summarize our point as being, is if you have big companies out there that think they're safe, they put a lot of effort, resources, and focus on being safe. Don't take the little things for granted, and put a program in place where every day, every individual is having to identify risks that day at lunch. Before you change the task, you switch your operation. If you're laying water line, you go to sewer line, you stop, you do a JHA, you have a safety meeting, you have a safety stand down, however you want to handle it, whatever you want to call it. That's where I'm at with my personal company, and that's kind of what I want to share with you guys. So on that note, I'm going to introduce a gentleman named Jeff Maddox, who's the owner of Pennington Utilities. Jeff came to work for me right out of college. I've known him since he was a little kid. He's one of my best friend's cousins. A couple years ago, he stepped out to own his own company, where I talked about my company was 700 employees. He's less than 50. He starts off, doesn't own a backhoe, doesn't own a trench box, and is trying to make it. And so I've asked him to share kind of some of his trials and tribulations on a much smaller company starting out with, where there is no culture, there is no safety implementation. He's had to do it from scratch. So Jeff Maddox, Pennington Utilities.
Well, first off, thank you for having me. Thanks North Texas for inviting me. First off, I want to apologize. I might do some jumping around. I get excited about this stuff. I still, when I show up to a job site, it's fun seeing big equipment, big pipe, deep holes. So sometimes I might get something in my head and I might just say it. So just bear with me as we go through this. First off, again, Jeff Maddox. I'm owner of Pennington Utility Construction. We started a year and a half ago, and like Zach said, graduated college at UTD, went to go work in North Texas contracting. I was there for 3 years and decided to go out on my own, and it's been quite the adventure in the year and a half we've been around. Our first year we did just under $2 million a year. We had 15 employees. Now we're up to about 30 employees. We're pushing $5 million for this year. So we're obviously a very small company compared to a North Texas contracting. And when we started, we had nothing. It was me and one guy, and we had to figure everything out. We had no safety program, no director. I'd been through some OSHA courses and some training and some NUCA safety classes, but I've always had a support team of safety individuals to help me. And here we are now by ourselves. And that's my main goal today, is to talk about some of those issues. And just to go over just like a couple examples, when you start off and you have nothing, no excavator, no trench boxes, and you're bidding these small projects, you don't have a GC like Hunt or Hill Wilkinson, like Zach was saying. These GCs rarely will have a safety coordinator. So the safety culture in these GCs and these projects, some of them just don't exist. And as the owner, you got to make that decision of, how am I going to play this game? How am I going to make these decisions? Do I put money in that bid for that trench safety box when you're 10 feet deep? Or do I put that money towards that new excavator? Those are the challenges that I face every day. It's a $100,000 job. You might make 10%. Well, this guy over here has absolutely no idea of safety who I'm bidding against. He's not going to put any money in there for safety. He's not going to have any type of safety program. He's not going to send his guys to any courses at UTA. And that's what I have to bid against. And those are the challenges. That's the biggest challenge. And where I'm fortunate is I currently have a crew out here at UTA doing the excavation for Dynamic Systems, the underground mechanical contractor, and we've had the opportunity to work with top-notch general contractors like a hunt. I've worked out at Southwest Airlines, where we were out there for a year. Worked with McCarthy out there. You know, they have a top-notch safety program. However, I've worked with small mom and pop, two-man owning GCs, and I've seen it all. I've seen it all from zero safety to the very top of hardcore safety. And when we're out here, on these big projects, we're allowed, when we're bidding these jobs, it's crazy, because now we can be safe. Now I can bid to be safe and have that trench box and have that safety guy come out here and send my guys to those classes. Another challenge we have is, speaking of like safety classes or events, you know, I have 4 crews, about to have 5 crews. If I try to take a crew off of a job for a couple of days to go to a safety class, that hurts me. I don't have the ability of 60 other crews that can come back me up. That really takes a hit on our bottom line when I take a crew or 2 for a day or 2 to go to a class. So that's another issue I have. You know, I've talked about the competition, and just to hit a couple of things on what Bob said about complacency. I was in the Marine Corps, and one of the things that they always preached was complacency kills. And I don't think we talk about that enough, is complacency. When you're in that 28-foot trench and you've been doing it for 30 years, that thing's not going to fall on you, and all of a sudden you're dead. You know, that's what happens. And what I try to preach to my guys out in the field, and as the owner, this is tough, because I bid a job for this many days. We're going to be out there for 10 days. But when I get out there and the conditions aren't what we thought, the soil isn't what we thought, the location isn't what we thought, I have to stop myself and remind myself that I have this job bid for 10 days, but it might take us 15. I got to preach to my guys that no matter what we do, we have to be safe. Because there's one thing I can't survive as a small company, and that's a serious injury or death. I can survive having to pay for a few more days of labor to complete the job. I can survive hitting a fiber optic line. I can survive making a mistake installing pipe. Okay, we can survive that. But as a small company and a small business owner, you can't survive that injury or death. It's just game over from there. So every day I have to preach to my guys that take your time, be safe, and we'll make it. We'll make it somehow. And another thing, what we do also as a small company, not having a big company, a safety program of any type. Out in the field, we have a lot of toolbox talks, and they're just 2-minute, 3-minute little talks, and we have paperwork. I have paperwork galore for being a small company. You know, my foremen are filling out 5 or 6 pieces of paperwork every day, from JHAs to excavation permits to confined space permits to daily reports. And what I use these things for, and what I hope it happens, is when we go and have these small toolbox talks, it triggers their mind to think. You know, they've been doing it for 30 years. He knows what he's doing, but man, maybe if we just talk about that trench excavation, or maybe we just talk about that confined space, maybe when they're about to go in that 30-foot deep manhole that's 30 years old that could contain gases, he might stop and go, wait a minute, let's spend the 5 minutes, let's go get our tripod, let's go get our gas monitors, and let's just do it right. You know, and that's what our goal is with that paperwork, is to set those triggers off and to make you think ahead and not just think in the moment, and figure out what is going to be the best approach to any job. And you know, that's about it. You know, that's all I have really. Just, again, coming from a small company, the challenge that we face is totally different from when you walk outside to that job site over there. It's totally different when you walk over to a Chipotle being built in Terrell, Texas. You know, the safety culture is totally different, and you know, and that's one thing that is a struggle, and you know, and the gap has to close, because you know, like I said, 27 deaths, hey, it's 27 too many last time I checked. So But anyways, thank you for having me, and if you have any questions, just please let me know.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm the Dallas Area Office Area Director. Like I said, I'm honored to be here. As Area Director for the Dallas Area Office, I wear two hats. One is enforcement, and one is compliance, basically outreach compliance assistance. And I wear both hats with both enthusiasm, and I feel that passion on both ways. But today we want to talk specifically about outreach and what it is that we do, and how we improve and do what we're supposed to be doing in trench and excavations. I do have a compliance assistant that works with me. He does all my outreaches. So this is important that everybody understand that as OSHA, we also do a lot of outreach. We have a compliance assistant that assists us in these projects. So as we move forward, you have a slide. Excavation safety, as Mr. Black just stated, is treacherous, it's dangerous. This is what you do. This is an occupation that we get into, and it's very unforgiving. As you look at the excavation, this should not happen. As you look at that slide, employees more concerns about, shade. This is unacceptable. These are the things that we, as professionals, make sure that this should never happen. Employees should not be unprotected. The things that we ought to be doing is not only protecting employees, but we're supposed to be saving lives. As professionals, this is what we ought to be doing. So it's imperative that we look at trench and excavations, and we'll talk also about confined space also, that we must ensure that employees are protected. And I will tell you, as recent as 1 month ago in my area office, we had a fatality, and it involved trench and excavation. So this is serious business. So I reach out to you to make sure that we do all the things we possibly can do to ensure that employees are protected at all times. It's important, it's imperative. We must do this. Employees' responsibility, we're basically going to talk about the updates and employee responsibilities. There's some construction e-tools on the website we'll give to you. We'll talk about the key points, which is the subparts B and AA. And also, we'll talk about in FY16 the fatalities that occurred between 15 and 16. Trench excavation is, like I said, it's quite dangerous and it's very unforgiving. And we also talk about confined spaces. The OSH Act basically said workplace safety and health is the responsibility of the employer. It also states it's the employer responsibility to make sure that all employees are protected, that all hazards are actually eliminated or controlled in the environment, in the work environment, period. It is the employer's responsibility. The bottom line, the cornerstone of it is prevention. We must prevent these things from happening. We have to set the tone as safety professionals. Make safety and health workplace a priority. It has to be. One of the things we talk about, how do you create incentives? We reward employees for showing initiative and raising safety concerns. Employees are protected under OSHA Act Section 11C. They have a right to make complaints. So let those complaints come to you. They can do what they want, but if you have an environment where they see things that are wrong and an open environment, that will open an avenue for you to correct things. And if you can see the slide, basically, if you could read it, we have some e-tools on the website that talks about how you can actually make contact and get these e-tools. They're freely available to you on the website, and every employer could have access to this information. I'll leave a few slides for you to have. So, cave-ins perhaps are the most feared in trench and hazards, but remember, these are not only hazards in cave-ins. There's all kinds of things that happen when you have trench and excavations, which including asphyxiation, lack of oxygen, confined space, inhalation of toxic fumes, drowning, electrocution, explosions, especially when they're digging near those lines that would cause explosions. So it's important that we understand it's not just the cave-ins, it's all the other things that are pertaining to trench and excavation. OSHA required that all workers in trenches and excavations be protected, and we talked about that briefly before. And the program should be identify all those hazards pertaining to trench and excavation. It's imperative that we do that. Some of the ways we can do this to prevent injuries in excavation is to have protective systems, failures, and make sure we have protective systems in place. Make sure that we inspect the sites before the employees enter, and during and after, and make sure that spoils are placed correctly. Also, make sure that you have safe egress and access. inside all these excavations and trenches. 29 CFR 26 subpart P talks about trench and excavation. It talks about also the scope and applications of the subparts. 651 talks about the general requirements. I know I don't have much time. I wish I could sit here and talk about all these regulations, but it's imperative as managers and safety individuals that we start looking at these things because it's important that we know what they mean. 652 talks about requirements for protective systems. Now, protective systems is important. It's your choice on what type of protective systems you select, but to make sure that you have a competent person who's doing this for you. It is imperative that a competent person is on site doing these things. Next slide, please. I appreciate you doing that. Okay. 652A1, protection of employees. It basically talks about each employee in excavation shall be protected from cave-ins in accordance with paragraphs B and C. Now, there are some exceptions, but be careful when we talk exceptions. You know, we should protect employees at all times. It talks about excavations that are in stable rock. I've been in Texas a little while. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I haven't seen much stable rock in these areas. So you have to look at that. Excavations less than 5 feet, but it also talks about, even though it's less than 5 feet, the competent person makes sure there's no potential for cave-ins. Okay? Even though that's the exception. Next slide, please. Competent person. This is always one of those things everybody tries to play with words. But the bottom line is the competent person is what it is. It's identifying existing predictable hazards and surrounding of working conditions which are unsanitary, hazardous, and dangerous to employees. But one of the most important things is, though, the competent person has the authority to take prompt corrective measures and to eliminate them. And that may mean removing employees from the excavation when he feels that it's hazardous. Next slide, please. And I'm going to cover some brief things about daily inspections. And you guys know what daily inspections mean. It's already in the regulation. And the daily inspection of excavation talks about adjacent area protective systems shall be made by the competent person prior to work, throughout the shift, during the shift, and then it talks about also after the rainstorm, hazardous increased occurrence, required by the employee's exposure can be reasonably anticipated. That means if you're digging into a sewer line, an old sewer line, it's reasonably anticipated that there's going to be probably gases or those sort of things, potential exposure to biohazard waste and those sort of things. The competent person must make these decisions. It's important. K2, where the competent person finds evidence where results of possible cave-in, indication of failure of the systems, hazardous atmospheres, exposed employees shall be removed from these hazardous areas. It is that competent person's responsibility, but it's also important that every foreman supervisor should be doing this. Next slide. If you look at this, I don't know if you could read all of it, but what it talks about is trench collapses from FY16, from 15 to 16. And if you notice, there talks about excavation collapse over and over and over again. As recently as last month, I have one in my area that one collapsed and unfortunately lost the life of an individual. It's just devastating when that happens. Next slide. If you notice, it goes on again, talks about trenches collapsing, mostly walls of the excavation collapsing, but all these things are preventable. The competent person knows approximately how deep he's going. There's some things that may happen. The blueprint may be a little different, but you know you're digging into the excavation. So you know you should select the type of protective systems. You should know what type of soil it is. And there's no reason in 2017 we should have employees working in excavation where trenches are collapsing with no protective systems. It's just unacceptable. And it's important that we all understand what that means. That means we're putting employees at risk. As Black was talking earlier, I listened to some of his conversations, some of the concerns he's having and what how he feels about employees being exposed. It's imperative that we do those things to protect employees. Next slide, please. I want to talk briefly about confined space because everyone kind of separate confined space, but as you know, the regulation has been changed. The regulation is what it is, and we must adhere to those things. Briefly, I'm going to cover those things. I don't have much time, but I will cover those things that, and I want to cover one particular one, which is rescue. But the regulation talks about, the scope of the inspection, and the scope of the regulation, 926 to 1201, which is the scope. The definitions are in there for everyone to read, to 1202. General requirements in 1203. 1204 talks about permit required confined space program. permit of progress in 1205, entry permit. And also, what you don't know is in 1203H talks about the collaboration between employers, which talks specifically about, how does the employer, the controlling employer, and that's one of the big differences between the construction standards and the general industrial standards, because it talks about collaboration between the employers, controlling employers, and what do they do together, and how they collaborate to make sure employees are safe, how to share that information, how to post that information. 1207 talks about training. 1208 is the duties of authorized entrance. 1209 is the duties of attendance. And these regulations are extensive, but you have to get into those and read it. As managers, safety directors, you have to look at these things and see how you protect your employees. Duties of the entry supervisors, make sure those duties is not just on paper, it's a responsibility. Duties means you do it. You have to actually implement those duties, not stand around and look at it. It is important. Rescue and emergency services, and that I want to cover here in a second because it's important. This is important what we're doing. When we talk about trench excavation, this symposium, it is a great opportunity for us to save lives. It's a great opportunity for us to protect our employees. And as I speak to you about these things, it is important that we all get together and make sure that we adhere to these rules and regulations, because they're not just rules and regulations, it's about how we protect our employees. Employee participation, which is 1212 of the regulation, and 1213 talks about a provision for documents to the secretary, so that the enforcement part of that is that you have to have that information available to the secretary upon when they ask. Next slide, please. As I previously talked about it, it talks about 1203, before works begin, the work site, each employee must ensure that a competent person identify all the confined spaces. And it's very simplistic. The competent person on site, that's what he ought to be doing. That's his job. You can't have 3 different jobs. He has to be doing what he ought to be doing. Identify each space that permits space through, and evaluate the elements of the space, including testing when necessary. Testing the atmosphere is very important. 1203 basically contains one or more work permits. The employee who identifies or who receives notice of the permit must, and it says must. So directors have to get into this regulation and make sure we comply and adhere to it. It's important. And it talks about 1203B1, inform exposed employees of the dangers. And it also talks about posting those signs, or similar way of posting those signs. It also talks about 1203B2, inform in a timely manner, in a manner other than posting. You have to inform all the employees of these hazards. Okay, next slide, please.
There we go.
In 2000, FY16, I picked up these 3 confined spaces, fatalities that occurred. And you would think that, like I said previously, we shouldn't have anyone dying from asphyxiation in manholes and those sort of things, because everyone knows what they're going to do. They know they're going into these manholes. These manholes sometimes are old. They've been around for a long, long time. And if it's been around for a long, long time, you may have gases and all the other things that go along with that. And I want to talk about that in particular because there's a fatality that occurred not too long ago, and I could tell you what happens. When I talked about earlier about rescue and emergency services, that's a key for all contractors, and it's important to understand what that means. Next slide. If you look at this, this is a fatal accident that occurred a few years ago. Actually, I was the accident compliance officer that did this, not that long ago. But if you look, it's very simple. They were going into an old manhole, making new ones, making connections. Well, guess what? I'm a big guy. Clearly, I cannot probably fit through that, but guys are going in and out of these holes. The problematic is that, what are the hazards inside this manhole? Unfortunately, an employee died in this particular manhole. Not only did he die, his nephew tried to retrieve him out. It's problematic. If you look, there's many things wrong with this particular manhole. There's no means of rescuing anyone. The employee wasn't wearing a harness, no retrieval systems. So how is it you'll be able to get someone out of there? I'm pretty strong, but it's hard to pick up 190 pounds and climb up a ladder. And so what happened in this particular case, couldn't find space. An individual was in there and he collapsed and died. What the sad thing about all this is that his nephew almost died. They had to stop him from going in. Next slide. This photograph, what you're looking at, is across the street, less than a football field away. What you're looking at is the police department and the fire department. The fire department is a volunteer fire service. No one coordinated the fire department. Most of the people are in training. The fire chief is there by himself. They did call 911. In most of these places, 911, it doesn't go straight to that fire department. It gets rerouted back and forth. Got to the actual fire department, the fire chief, the foreman, everyone was standing there. No one walked over even to the fire department to get help. They were just calling 911. Had they just walked over before the job started and go to the fire chief and says, hey, I'll be doing this, I need your assistance. I don't have no form of rescue. I have nothing. Maybe he would have told them that my people are in training, I'm the only one here. He did show up, but he noticed that hole, he couldn't fit in there. He's a big guy like me. And there's no way he could go in with all his equipment and go in. The only thing he could do is recover the body. Unfortunate. Had they placed a tripod, a rescue device, put a harness on him, even if he had collapsed because something had happened, they'd be able to pull them out. So meanwhile, the fire chief could not even go in. So when we talk about the regulation standards, it's not about the regulation standards necessarily. It's about what you're doing as an employer, what we need to do as an employers, what employers should be doing at all times. You know, excavation is important. And when you talk about confined space in excavations, then you must ensure that you do all the things that you're supposed to. We have all kinds of tools available to you. We have all kinds of collective things that you can use. There's checklists on the websites. All the things you should do as a competent person to ensure that employees are protected. It is important that we all collaborate together in this symposium and make sure we understand it continues to happen. And this FY17, and we need to stop this from happening. And it can be stopped. All confined spaces can be stopped from anyone becoming fatalities or being injured. All individuals working in excavation, all the injuries can be stopped. All fatalities can be stopped, and it must be stopped. And we collectively have to do that. Next slide. As it talks about employee responsibility, it's a quick summary of what we talked about. Review of some of the key points. I don't have much time to talk, I think I'm running out of time as I look at Mr. Braun over here. FY16s, we talked about those fatalities that have occurred. If you looked at the death of each worker in America is tragic and is one too many. Period. It should never happen. Workplace safety and health regulations are known for minimum requirements. That's all they are. If you truly care about employees, we should more than just do what the minimum requirements are. It says you're supposed to put the pole approximately 2 feet away. Why just 2 feet 2 inches? Why not move it away completely? Those are minimum standards. 25 to 36, which is 69% of the workers in trench excavation during FY16 were killed due to cave-ins collapse. All those were preventable. 3 of the 18 workers deaths in confined space during FY16 were asphyxiation. All of those were preventable. Every one of those. And you could do ventilations, you do continuous monitoring, periodic monitoring, provide employees the appropriate PPE, ensure they enroll in the respiratory protection program. All these things that we can be doing. There's nothing new. We can do this. So, bottom line, what is needed? Improve and focus on employee planning and safety inspections of trenches and confined spaces. Improve the effectiveness of training and practices of competent persons. Ensure they're implementing their knowledge. Is implementation of these things. Most everyone has a written program. We have to implement these programs. Make it a working, written document. Prevent worker asphyxiation, death in confined spaces by adhering to the 1926-1203, which it states basically before you begin work on the work site, each employer must ensure that a competent person identify the confined space and all the hazards associated with it. It goes back to all of us. What is it that we're going to do to improve? And what are we going to do to continue to make sure that no one else gets injured, maimed, or killed in trenches, excavations, or any confined spaces? Next slide. I thank you for your time. I didn't have much time, and I appreciate it. You guys giving me the opportunity to be here. I appreciate you putting on this, Mr. Braun and Nuka and all the other contractors. I think it's important that we do this. I think that we have all the tools available to us to make sure that we prevent future fatalities. I think we have all the resources to help us do this. We have a lot of things on the websites. It's available, freely available to you. And I thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. If you have any questions.
No. Tim will be.
All right, so I'll somewhat close this out or thank everybody for coming, but I wanted to also bring up, as Basil just, reiterated, there's lots of resources around here. I mean, you have NUCA full force and DFW. We meet with OSHA once a quarter. That's been going on for over 2 years. That's priceless. We sit in a room, no agenda. We can ask them any question we want. We can go over trends. I mean, it's proven priceless. We have the trench training event that we've done in coalition with OSHA that's happening in October. This is the 3rd year. We have 350 guys, trade workers be trained, 8 stations, an OSHA instructor, a NUCA instructor. You have NUCA meeting once a month, open book, silica standard, driver safety. I mean, we're going over all this stuff. That's open to anybody. And I mean, as Basil also alluded to, it's the employer's responsibility to keep people safe. We have the stuff we've all been doing for 50 years. I mean, we do our own training on competent person, trench safety, confined space, rigging, flagging, OSHA 30, CPR. You're doing this, but going back to what Jeff was saying with his employees, it's the triggers. I mean, the 2 accidents I alluded to, which were installing a trench box and moving a trench box, are the 2 biggest accidents, potential injuries that we've ever experienced. They both happened on a job with a 20-year industry veteran, competent person, trench safety. It's the triggers that no one talked about the risk of moving the trench box. It wasn't discussed with the crew. A couple bad decisions before they know it. There's a very expensive machine damaged, costing the company money, putting employees at risk, and so that's I know our NUCA's big focus, and even some of the larger firms is the make a plan, THA, JHA, toolbox talks, whatever you want to call it, but we're all making a big push to talk about risks, identify hazards every day, several times a day. So whether it be a laborer to a superintendent is potentially in harm's way, they say, we just talked about not picking up the shackle that's too heavy, I'm not going to do it. We just talked about being careful when we put this trench box together. I'm looking 3 hours down the road when it's in the ditch and we're 20 foot deep, and I'm going to stop and I'm going to look 2 minutes ahead of my time when I could pinch my finger in the spreader bar. That's the big focus, and I think this deal today has been awesome, but I want to reiterate the resources that are, you got so many opportunities to be safe, whether you're a new company with no safety program, with no equipment, working on job sites where the people could care less about safety, all the way to being an established company with in-house training, with the big picture figured out. We all are seeing the same trends with the split-second decisions where an employee should have stopped work or a supervisor should have gone over that. So it's a work in progress. There's a lot of GCs around here that are supporting this. McCarthy just had a subcontractor safety roundtable with Texo. I think several hundred attended. Austin Bridge and Road, Austin Industries having a executive safety roundtable 2 days from now. There's plenty of places to plug in, whether you're just starting out or you want to eliminate the very small injuries that come with employees making bad split-second decisions. So I appreciate everybody coming, and that's kind of the contractor's view, OSHA's view, and UTA, which is a great partner. So hopefully everybody took away something valuable from this. Does anybody else want to speak? Okay. I appreciate
Zach,
it.
will you address this one thing for us?
Yes, sir.
And you may want to repeat it so they can hear it.
Okay.
You were talking about you go from water pipe to sewer pipe, things change rapidly. Talk about how critical it is to have a really good, competent person, how you guys address it, the training they get, the authority they have.
Not a problem. We've even seen trends where, and keep an eye, I've taken a long look at every time we have an injury or a near miss, we try to talk about it, what happened, I agree with you guys that it's always preventable. 99.9% of the time it's preventable. And so we've seen a trend where our employees will do a job hazard analysis, a pre-excavation checklist for 15-foot deep sewer pipe. We're going 200 feet a day. At noon, they have lunch, they switch over to water pipe 4 foot deep, it's bench back, 20-foot joints versus 13-foot joints. You know, there's all these different dynamics that are involved, sand embedment versus stone embedment. Everything changes. All the risks are different. You're going faster, you're shallower, you're different embedment, the pipe is longer, smaller equipment. All these dynamics change, and the guys, they take it for granted and they just start. You know, it's the big push, feet per day, got to finish the job. You may or may not have people above you that care if you want to take the time to be safe. So it's our job, you know, to change the culture of the company and change the employee's mindset of, and I'll plug McCarthy again. McCarthy does a THA, a task hazard analysis. Instead of doing a JHA in the morning, and it's, a lot of people, it's debatable, do you do a JHA for the whole day or do you do a JHA for the task? McCarthy does a THA, and every time you change task, you stop and have a safety meeting. It's a little book that everybody keeps in their pocket. It's 6-7 lines you fill out, and you go over the hazards of the task you're about to address. So, you know, that's a really worthwhile venture. And I know they're a big supporter of. It's got to be fresh. I mean, just because 3 months ago a guy went through confined space, is that really a reason not to talk about the manhole you're going to enter that morning? It takes 5 minutes. It's not going to change the margin of the firm. It's not going to change how much you get done that day. It's just a you know, you owe it to your employees to give them the 5 minutes to talk about the hazard and mitigate it. So that's a lot of people are of the belief that when you change tasks, that's really when you need to stop and go over the hazards. And so as all these contractors get together, and like I talk about meeting with you guys and meeting with Nuke, we all talk about, and you air your dirty laundry of, well, we had an injury, we had a, you know, you can pick up patterns, and then we're constantly brainstorming ways to get these guys the right to stop work, task hazard. I mean, there's a million ideas, and we're just that's things like today where you can talk about it out loud. Somebody says, well, what about this? Or we're doing this. And that's why even the GCs around DFW are really getting on board. So it's a lot of resources. And I think that's what I would conclude with is, you know, there's the OSHA standards, which are the minimum. If you fail to comply with those, you will be penalized on several different fronts, whether it's your own profit or legally out, whatever you want to call it. But there's really no excuse not to plug in. I mean, it's there's so many people that'll talk to you about safety, and there's so many programs now. You have consultants, you have GCs that are requirement. I mean, DFW and all of Texas, the culture has gotten so much better. It's just still, we got to keep trying. And there's always, the pace is very heightened right now. 5 years ago, you had 6 months to do $1 million job. Now you have 2 months. 5 years ago, you bid a job that started in 3 months. Today, you bid a job that starts next week. And the dynamic's changing. Pace is changing, the volume of work is increased, schedules are shorter. So I mean, we're trying to adjust to all that. But I mean, what I would say is a lot of people spending a lot of money and a lot of effort on being safe. So there's really no excuse not to plug into the resources. I mean, there's like meeting with you guys face to face. I mean, we could run and hide and think you're the bad guy. We can shut the job down when you pull up and run and hide, or we can meet with you once a quarter. We can discuss the issues and try to work through it. So I'm proud of where we've gotten to, but it's just still a work in progress. So, you know, want to say a few words? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. First off, I'd like to say thank you to UTA, to my supervisor at OSHA for affording me this opportunity. As Basil so eloquently said, it's very important and it's highly imperative that we continue to do all that we can do to save lives on a daily basis. One person dying in an excavation or a confined space is one too many. Nevertheless, OSHA has a very important mission that we're tasked with. As many as you, the employers, you're tasked with ensuring that your employees go home every day the same way they came to work. There are many stories that I could think of because I was a compliance officer. I currently work at the regional office, but time constraints, I don't have the time to go into those stories. Basil, Josh, There's many people that I work with on a daily basis that are very passionate about safety and health. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to let everyone know, as Pemington said, he's a small employer. There's a lot of small employers in the DFW Metroplex, and they feel that they have no recourse or no avenues to reach out and get safety and health help. There is a resource and there's information and help that you can get. You can come to these facilities such as UTA, and OSHA affords small employers with avenues that they can get help. We have a consultation program to where consultation comes out at your request of the employer, and they provide you all these services. They can write programs for you, and this is free. The regional office, OSHA, we have partnerships, we have alliances. NUCA, we have an alliance with NUCA that we've had for approximately 2 years. They come out, as Zach said, they come out, they let us know certain things that are happening specifically with various companies, and we brainstorm, we do track and trending, we do informative sessions with them, and they don't have any reservations with talking to us. So my thing is, I guess, if you have any questions or you have any dilemmas or any concerns, always remember, OSHA is not your enemy, we're not your adversary. 1-800-321-OSHA. You can call OSHA, and you can do that anonymously. We don't care where your job site is. All we care about is the activity that you're doing and what you may need help with. We have people on the phones from 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. In addition, we have 12 area directors within Region 6. Basil is one of them. They're very passionate about what they do. If they were not passionate, they wouldn't do the job that they're doing. So I just like to conclude and just thank everybody, the people online, for your time. Thank UTA for hosting this, and NUCA for being here. And small employers such as Pemington, just know that you do have resources, and you can reach out and you can get help, you can get assistance. Do we have any questions, Bob? No questions at this time. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it.